I already made a little video about why you probably should get a NAS, but since then I've really been using this thing a lot more, and I found a cool few users and apps that I use now on my day-to-day work to actually get stuff done. So, in this video, we will look at everything I run on my NAS. And of course, if you have suggestions or recommendations, I'll gladly take them. And I'll also gladly give you this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare. They offer a range of services to make sure your Linux server or workstation fleet is secure and well maintained, thanks to kernel life patching and extended lifecycle support for end-of-life distributions. This time they're inviting you to a webinar to help you automate how you manage your data centers. They will talk about the Orca Rhino platform that lets you automate host deployments, configurations, vulnerability patches, and more. But that's not all. You will also learn about life patching for your system so they can stay up to date and secure without rebooting and without any downtime. And they will explain the types of organizations that would benefit from these approaches. So, if you're interested, the webinar will happen on the 20th of September and you can already register by clicking the link in the description of the video. Okay, so to begin with, the NAS I'm using is a Synology DS1522 Plus. It's set up with 5 4TB drives, all grouped into one single storage pool with one drive being used for data recovery in case of a problem. It's running the not quite open source DiskStation manager from Synology, which does use some open source components, but the system itself isn't fully open source, unfortunately. And I will definitely need to look into free and open source NAS operating systems in the future, even if it means creating my own with a mini PC and a bunch of external drives. The NAS is sitting comfortably in my living room. It's plugged through Ethernet straight into my ISP's router, and in terms of the energy it consumes, I can't say I've seen a difference in my bill since I got it, seeing as I always have at least one way more powerful computer running, either for gaming or for video editing, so it really does not make a difference. And of course, depending on where you live and the prices of energy there, your mileage may vary. Also important to note, this video is not sponsored by Synology. They did not give me any hardware or any money for this video. They don't even know I'm making it. Now, the first thing I recently started doing on the NAS is virtual machines. I use these very often to try out certain distros before testing them on real hardware, or just to grab a few quick screen recordings for various videos. The issue is, since virtual machines can use a lot of disk space, I tend to delete them after I'm done, which leads me to reinstall a lot of Ubuntu's or a lot of Windows 11's just for a quick screen recording, which is not super efficient. So I installed Virtual Machine Manager, and it is pretty easy to use. You just create a VM, you select how many CPU cores and how much RAM you want, you create a virtual disk, and you select an ISO from the NAS storage, and you're good to go. And of course, performance is not the best. It's a NAS, not a very powerful 8 or 16 core CPU, and also there's a bit of latency even when viewing the VM through the local network, but it's good enough for my needs. It's a pretty easy thing to use, and now I don't need to keep VMs on various laptops or desktops and waste a bunch of storage space for stuff I only use from time to time. It's better to waste space on the multi-terabyte storage device than on your active daily driver. Although I guess I could also just create the virtual hard drive for my local VMs on my computers in the NAS storage through Samba, but yeah, I decided to use this app instead. Another thing I run is Plex. You probably know what that is, it's not very original. It's a media server. I store movies and TV shows in there, and I play these from my TV with the Plex app. It works really well, it's free of charge, it automatically grabs metadata and posters for movies, and it remembers where you left off. It lets you move on to the next episode of a show. It's just really good, like you have your very own streaming service where there isn't a lot of super low quality filler. And of course, all movies are ethically sourced and of the best quality, like for example, this movie that I never completed because it was so good. Or this one that I just haven't watched yet, but got some very interesting reviews. I really like Plex, but I do need to try Jellyfin. I'm hearing some good things about it, and I could also run that on my NAS using Docker. At some point, I will take the time to look at it. In the meantime, Plex was available as a one-click install from the package center of Synology DiskStation Manager, and I already had a Plex account and another server running on my own PC, so I knew about it and I knew how it worked. I also use my NAS to run my own VPN. VPNs are a tricky thing, because if you use one from a company, then you have to trust that company to not keep logs, to not collect data, to encrypt everything, and that's something I always had a hard time with, so I decided to host my own. And of course you do lose access to foreign IPs, because of course you're running the thing at home, so you can't bypass geo-blocking, for example, and also the IP address that you will use through your NAS and through the VPN will probably be the same as what your computer would have had in your home, because, well, it's always transiting through your ISP's router, so you've got one single IP address. Now, I used a VPN server app from the NAS's package manager, and I used OpenVPN. Setting things up was very easy. I just had to export the config file and import it in GNOME settings, after modifying the file to add the domain name that my NAS uses as the IP, and I also had to open the relevant ports in my router's config, of course. So yeah, it's not the most powerful use case for a VPN, because yes, I do share the same IP address when I use it at home than what my computer would have had anyways, but at least the traffic is encrypted, my ISP can't easily know everything I'm doing, and when I'm on a public Wi-Fi network or someone else's network, then at least I'm a little bit safer. Now, another thing I use my NAS for is to stop paying for cloud photo and video storage. I use Synology Photos here. It's a nice little app that you can run on your NAS and on your mobile devices. What it does is basically the same thing as Apple Photos or Google Drive. You open the app, it backs everything up from your phone to your NAS, and you can access them from any web browser or manage albums. Which I am really not good at. I really need to save some time and actually start putting stuff in albums, because right now it's a big giant mess. You also get face recognition if you want it, and it will create a people album that lets you tag who everyone is. And it's doing a pretty good job at it too. Apart from recognizing as a person this sort of creepy ceramic face that one of my friends made. Please don't be a person, ceramic thingy, please. No, but to be fair, she also does make some really cool, non-creepy ceramic stuff. Now, I used to back up everything, including my photos, to my Nextcloud instance, but since I host it on a VPS, storage space can be a bit costly. So I decided to use all the terabytes of storage I have at home instead. And I can sync these photos back to my computers by using the Synology Drive client and creating a sync task. So let's talk about that, the most original use case for a NAS, file storage and backups. So yeah, of course, like everyone else with a NAS, I store files and backups on it. To do that, I use the Synology Drive client, which is available on Linux. On Fedora, I had to add a copper repo to do so, but it works perfectly. I use this app to create a backup of my /home directory to my NAS storage. It's powerful enough, you just check the directories you want to back up and uncheck what you don't want. You can add rules to ignore certain types of files, and it will store everything in a folder of your choosing. I also created a sync task to sync the photos that came from my phone to my NAS to my computer. Although, unfortunately, it doesn't sync them using a directory for each album, which is a bit annoying. I would prefer if it just created one folder per album. It would make reorganizing these photos a lot easier. Now for now, I have a backup for my two daily driver computers, the laptop and the desktop. But since I'm experimenting with replacing that setup with just one laptop that does everything, I will probably be able to just have the one backup and the one sync task. I also use my NAS as a file exchange share thingy. When I record something on a test laptop for a video, I store all the recordings on the NAS, and I download them back from the computer I will do the editing on. I also use it to share files with other people, as you can share a public link to a file or folder. I used that during my ill-fated experiment with a video production company, for example. The first hint that it wasn't going to work out should have been that they only had a free 15 gig Google Drive account for me to store all the footage for 4 videos. I also used to use Nextcloud for that, and I still do for a lot of small files, but for multi-gig screen recordings, it's really not suitable as I don't have enough storage on the VPS I run Nextcloud on, and upgrading that would be way too costly when I can just use the NAS. All the storage is also accessible through Samba, so I can connect to it easily from my local network from any computer. And when I'm not at home, I just log in to the webpage for my NAS for that instead. Now, there are a few things I want to try, but I did not get around to just yet. The first one is Nextcloud, and as I said, I currently host it on Linode. It's absolutely fine, but I would like to use Nextcloud to store everything without worrying about storage space, and a VPS can be relatively expensive for that. So what I'm planning to do is to use the Container Manager app to use Docker and install Nextcloud with that on the NAS. I'm expecting a few complications because my ISP doesn't allow loopback, so I will probably have to set up dynamic DNS, but it should not be too hard. And then I will need to migrate everything that's on my current Nextcloud instance to the new one, which is also not going to be very fun and will take a while. But as an added benefit, I won't have to use Synology Photos or Synology Drive anymore, which are proprietary applications. I would much rather use Nextcloud for everything. It will be all open source and much better. Another thing I would like to do is automating a download of the latest videos from my YouTube subscription feed, and to create an RSS feed for that, so I can just use any podcast client or app to watch just these videos, and avoid being sucked into YouTube and spend hours watching stuff that I'm only vaguely interested in, instead of doing cooler stuff like painting my Warhammer minis. Of course it's cool! It's nerdy, but it's cool. I could probably do all of that using the built-in task scheduler on the NAS, running a custom script, because that thing can run bash scripts. I would just have to whip up something with YouTube downloads to get the videos and store them, and find a way to build an RSS feed in the process, but I'm pretty sure it shouldn't be too tricky. Or I could just save the videos to various folders in my Plex media server and use that to watch them. Another thing I would like to try is to set up Chasm workspaces. It's a self-hostable solution to run desktops, operating systems, or apps remotely and stream them to a web browser. I'm pretty sure I can install that using Docker on the NAS and replace the virtual machines manager that Synology offers with something open source. It probably won't change my workflow all that much, but open source solutions are just more my jam, and it's a fun project to try and tackle. Also, it will be Docker in Docker, because Chasm uses Docker images to run its operating systems or applications that you then stream. So it's probably going to go very smoothly, and I will probably learn nothing doing all of that. And finally, the various settings I use for the NAS. First, I set up a power schedule. When I'm sleeping, I don't need the NAS running, so I set it to shut down at 11 PM every day, and to start back up at 7:30 AM when I get out of bed. This way, I don't get any noise or energy consumption while I'm not using it. And if I ever need it anyway, I can just disable that temporarily, or I can just get off my ass and actually turn it on. Or I could enable Wake on LAN so it would wake up automatically when I try to access it. I also enable disk hibernation after 20 minutes of inactivity to reduce power consumption a bit as well. I set the fan speed to quiet mode because it's in my living room and I don't want something making more noise than it has to, although when using VMs it might help performance to set it to cool mode or full speed mode. I also reduced the brightness of the LEDs to the minimum, apart from being completely off, because these things go way too bright otherwise. And that's about it for now. I feel like I've only scratched the surface of what's possible with this thing, especially using Docker, and I am very excited to start trying Nextcloud or building my own scripts to really use that storage to the maximum. And of course, if you have a NAS and you use it for a lot of cool stuff that I don't use mine for, don't hesitate to let me know in the comments, and I won't hesitate to let you know about our sponsor. Tuxedo makes laptops and desktops that ship with Linux out of the box. The hardware is picked specifically to run well with Linux. And if there are some kinks to iron out, Tuxedo actually contributes upstream to fix these issues, so any other provider or distro or anyone else basically can benefit from these improvements. They have a big range of devices from NUCs, Ultrabooks, giant gaming laptops or workstations, gaming towers, you name it. You have a solid choice for the components you want to put in your device, but also for the keyboard layout, for the logo on the lid of your laptop. And all the laptops can be opened, repaired, and upgraded, especially for the RAM, the SSD, the battery, and sometimes the wireless card. So if you need a new computer and you want to run Linux on it, and you want to support a company that actually contributes to Linux's development, click the link in the description below and get yourself a Tuxedo PC. They're really, really good. So thanks everyone for watching the video. As always, you can subscribe, like, turn on notifications, or you can dislike and tell me why in the comments as well. And if you want to support the channel, there are plenty of links in the description for Patreon, LibraPay, PayPal, YouTube thanks, whatever, you know how this works. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!